I'm currently reading a book that just came out, published by Unitarian Universalist Publications, Skinner Press. It's called Turning Point, Essays on a New Unitarian Universalism. This is a collection of 20 essays, not necessarily by ministers or even higher functionaries in the association, although many of them are. But what it's trying to do is lay out a picture of what we are, where we do things well, where we could improve, what the future holds, not only for us, but for denominations and religions in general as we move on into the future. So I'm about halfway through it. Some of it is rather depressing as it talks about some of the weaknesses, but it's also inspiring at points. It's cautionary, but it also tries to envision things in new ways. Reading it can make you uncomfortable when it strikes at a spot they consider a weakness, that particular author, and you find yourself thinking, oh, you're talking about me. That doesn't make me happy. Why'd I buy this stupid book? But it also, if you open your mind and listen, even if you don't necessarily agree, it does make you think long and hard about some of the things you hold dear. So I do recommend the book, and if you're interested, get back with me or get the title off the sermon video afterwards. But it's very thought-provoking, and I'm going to be quoting from one of the essays in that book a little bit later in this. But what it does point out, what you probably already know, but what the book emphasizes, is that Unitarian Universalists are a collection of people with widely diverse views and opinions. I know, you didn't know that, right? That's but maybe not as diverse as we like to think we are, and I've talked about that also when I talked about liberal religion is not liberal politics. And there are areas where we have our blind spots. But we are diverse enough that there's not a whole lot that every single one of us holds dear, that every single one of us holds sacred, if you like that word, or just transcendentally important. Whatever you want to call it, you might cherish it, and someone else might go, I can take it or leave it. It's just not that transformative for me. Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister and transcendentalist, gave a sermon in 1841, and I did a talk on this a while back, called The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity. Now remember, the Unitarian movement back in the 1840s was a Christian movement, progressive liberal Christian movement. If, as I go through this, you have trouble with the word Christian, you can plug in Unitarian Universalist if you want, because he is speaking from the heart on a transformation or a way of viewing what he held dear, Unitarian Christianity. He said that there was a core teaching, the permanent, that really mattered in Christianity. And then after that was added over time, layer after layer after layer of extraneous, unnecessary, and often erroneous and even harmful teachings and rituals and dogma. And he was trying to strip that away in this sermon and in his ministry. And I remember as I read this sermon, I had a little heartburn with it when I was in seminary because I still have some issues when Christian is used over and over and over, and I came out of that fundamentalist version of Christianity. So again, I want to emphasize, wherever you're coming from, he's speaking of a liberal, progressive Christianity that ultimately became what we are today. And he writes, an age will come in which ours shall be reckoned a period of darkness. So he's talking about his time and his religion. There will come a time when it's reckoned a period of darkness, like the 6th century when men groped for the wall but stumbled and fell, because they trusted a transient notion, not an eternal truth. An age when temples were full of idols set up by human folly, an age in which Christian light had scarce begun to shine into men's hearts. And whilst this change goes on, while one generation of opinions passes away, another rises up. Christianity itself, that pure religion, which exists eternal in the constitution of the soul, in the mind of God, is always the same. The only form it demands is a divine life, doing the best thing in the best way from the highest motives. I love that line. I've got it underlined and bolded in my sermon. Christianity, the true, eternal essence of Christianity is just this: doing the best thing in the best way from the highest motives. His highest motives, of course, were to emulate God, the characteristics of God. You can plug in anything there for your highest motives. But that's what Christianity demanded, and nothing else. Not an adherence to a certain dogma, a certain view, say, of the Trinity, a belief that God tortures people in hell. These things were added, he claims, and the eternal, pure form of Christianity is just this: do the best thing in the best way from the highest motives. He also argues that true Christianity does not demand all people think alike, but to think rightly and get as near as possible at the truth. Not all people live alike, nor are they supposed to, but they should live wholly and get near as possible to a life that emulates a divine life, emulates the divine standard, if you will. He also argues that true Christianity, were it practiced properly, big emphasis there, were it practiced properly, would not lead to conformity, but to vast diversity. Listen to what he says. This is just amazing when you contrast it to more standard Christian teachings. Christianity lays no rude hand on the sacred peculiarity of individual genius and character. There is no Christian sect which does not fetter a man. In other words, all Christian denominations try to put shackles on people. It would make all men think alike. And again, I apologize for the sexist language. It's 1840. He's saying men. It would make all men think alike or smother their convictions in silence. Were all men Quakers or Catholics or Unitarians or Baptists, there would be much less diversity of thought, of character, and of life. Less of truth active in the world than now. But Christianity gives us the largest liberty of the sons of God. And were all men Christians after the fashion of Jesus, thus this is amazing. This variety would be 1,000 times greater than now. Imagine that. If everyone followed Jesus, our diversity would be vastly greater than it is now. Instead of trying to conform people to all think alike, we would just be all over the place, which indeed the early church was. And people just conveniently ignore that. There was a wide diversity of thought in early Christianity. For Christianity is not a system of doctrines, but rather a method of attaining oneness with God. Now you can imagine that speeches like this, sermons like this, didn't set well with the standard version of Christianity of the time. This is why Unitarians and Transcendentalists within the Unitarian movement weren't invited to a lot of the parties. Because, wait, you're just going to trash our convictions as a Episcopalian or Baptist or whatever it might be. All he's saying is, do the best you can to emulate the divine standard, and our variety is not a problem. That's profound. That's what has led to what we are today. Parker argues in this sermon that much of what passed for Christianity in his time was merely human tradition and dogma. He points out that Jesus himself never wrote anything down. It was all written after his death, at least 40 years after his death. If true Christianity, as taught by Jesus, were so simple that he could simply teach it by word of mouth, instead of having long, lengthy documents laying it all out, how important could all these detailed teachings really be if Jesus didn't think it was necessary to do that? And by the way, many great religious leaders are like this. The Buddha was the same way. Didn't write anything down. Whatever was important, you could remember and share with someone else. Jesus was the same way. He wasn't writing down scriptures. He wasn't having scribes write down things. Get that all verbatim, please. That's absolutely important. Make sure everyone gets it. He didn't do that. It was something he could share and could be remembered and shared. It was that simple, according to Parker. So if Christianity was this simple, how important could these layers and layers of doctrines and teachings and rulings by the church that would declare you a heretic or not, how important could those be? They couldn't be, according to him. Rather, they are destructive and should be done away with. He wanted Unitarians to focus on the permanent aspect of Christianity, not the transient. The transient being all this temporary stuff that humans come up with. And the permanent was do the best thing in the best way for the highest motives. That could be our motto today. That could be on our sign out there right now. And it would be as true today as it was when he gave this sermon. So today I'd like us to consider the transient and the permanent in Unitarian Universalism. Ours is a religion struggling with its identity and has been for quite some time. We struggle even with what word best describes us. Should we be a denomination, a religion, a movement, or an association, or something else? And I've talked about this many times. I think it's fair to call us a religion. And yet, just the other day, Jancy and I were still debating what religion was and whether it applied. And many people are uncomfortable with that term applying to us, and others embrace it wholly. And what I ultimately said to her was, religion isn't about gods or goddesses. Religion is a human creation, a community of people seeking to find truth and meaning, and we do not have to surrender the word religion to people who are mired in dogma or fundamentalists or anyone else. Religion embraces exactly what we do here, and I'm not going to surrender the word. So, you may not agree with me, but that's where I'm coming from, and we are a religion. These things, believe it or not, these things that people claim form a religion, a belief in a certain deity or statement of faith or doctrine or something, those are the transient, not the permanent. Consider these words of our current UUA president, Unitarian Universalist Association President Peter Morales, and this is coming out of the book I told you about. So here is the challenge as I see it. At a personal level, people need religious community. We are relational creatures who only become fully human in a web of loving and committed relationships. This is the ideal of covenanted community. At the global level, the world desperately needs movements that embrace human diversity, are committed to compassion and justice, and seek to live in harmony with the web of life on earth. Now, here are some of the things I would call the permanent. Embracing human diversity, being committed to compassion and justice, seeking to live in harmony with the web of life on earth. Or as Parker said, do the best thing in the best way for the highest motives. I think those mesh nicely. What things are transient? Names, logos, buildings, organizational structures, theological beliefs, and even God concepts are transient. They change over time. The membership of our congregation is transient. Very few of you were here when I first stepped through this door over 8 years ago. And yet, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma still exists. And it is strong and vibrant, in my opinion, anyway. And that happens despite the fact that the population changes here. We lose people who move away, we lose people to death. Some people simply find this no longer meets their needs and they leave. But others come in and fill the void, and the community continues. And amen for that. And I thank you all for keeping this place as vibrant as it is. As I said last time I spoke, the church is not the building, the church is all of you. I want to point out again and again, don't get hung up on the transient. And this is certainly true as we go into our second hour and decide whether or not to take another step in our church's life and existence. Don't get hung up on the transient. What really matters, regardless of decisions made and votes taken, is the community here. I return to Peter Morales for a couple more thoughts. We take ourselves seriously, we need to take ourselves seriously as a religious movement. We have been so wary for so long of being like evangelical fundamentalists that we often lose sight of the fact that we too are a religious movement. Religion is not and never has been about agreeing to a set of theological or philosophical propositions. Religion has always been about so much more. At its center is a community of people who come together to carry on a tradition and to shape a common future. What some call a community of memory and hope. Now these are interesting words, and I suspect that most of us have thought, and may think now, that religion is definitely about agreeing to a set of theological propositions. It's probably what we were taught as children. That's why so many churches have these creeds and statements of faith. These are the things that we all as a church believe about God, and if you want to be a member, you must agree that you believe these things. And that's what we tie to the word religion, because most of us experience that at some point. What if instead we think of religion as a community of people who do two things? We carry on a tradition, and we shape a common future. Or we seek to find truth and meaning, and to make room for each person to do that individually. What if that were the definition of religion? I had a chance to go and speak to a home school group recently. Charity connected me with someone there, and they have a class at the homeschool group in Shelbyville that is studying different religions. And I said, I'd love to go out there and talk to them. I said I could talk to them about Buddhism. And much to my surprise, they invited me. And I dragged out the cushions, and there were four high school kids, and the teacher and we sat, and I taught them how to sit, and they were all following, doing exactly. I was a little worried that maybe if they were Christians, they'd think, oh, we're not going to do that. They ate it up. We sat in our circle, and if you don't know, when Buddhists do their lesson, they sit on their cushions in a circle or a square. They don't sit in chairs or stand. So I decided I would try that with them. And they were interested and engaged. It was really exciting. And then one of the boys, who was probably 14, give or take, he looks at me very earnestly and he says, after they pressed me quite a bit on theology, by the way, because I kept telling them, the Buddha said, don't ask me what happens after you die. I don't know. I'm worried about the here and now and the suffering I see in the world now. And we'll find out. I don't know. And they were amazed that there was this religion that didn't make a claim about the afterlife or about God. What? And so I said, no, we have Christians who come to Nashville to the Zen Center and sit with us. And they just were really struggling with this. And they even said, what do you believe about God and about the afterlife? And finally one of the boys says, is Buddhism a religion? And I said, that is an excellent question, because wrestling with what religion is goes on all the time. And I said, really? What's it matter? It's a label. In Asia, they don't even separate religious and secular. It's life. It's a way of dealing with life. And I said, so religion isn't about a belief in God, or at least it doesn't have to be. I know that's normally how you look at it. But religion is about finding out how best to live in this life right now, and a group of people who come together to do that. And they thought that was pretty neat. Now, maybe I left and they all went, what a whack job. I had no idea. I was able to put in some plugs for Unitarian Universalism also. And I did tell her I'd come back and talk about that, but we rarely get listed on Great World Religions, so probably not. But I told her I'd do it if she wanted to. So one final quote from Peter Morales. For me, religion is not about having faith. Listen to that. Religion is not about having faith, but about being faithful. Faith is not something you or I possess. It is a relationship, really, a set of ongoing relationships. My religion is about being faithful to what I hold most dear, about being faithful to my commitments, to people close to me, about being faithful to what I hold sacred. One thing that has truly touched me over the years is the faithfulness of the people in this congregation. Not to say everyone's flawless, we're all human, we all have our things that set other people off. That is the nature of being human. But there is such a genuine care and compassion for people within this group that you can't help but not notice it if you've been here a while. I've witnessed it over and over again as I've been here, and it is a core aspect of any religion worth practicing, and certainly something that should be the permanent, not the transient. Now in the second hour, we're going to be discussing and voting on a major possible change in our church as we consider buying a new building. Changes like this can cause anxiety and stress, if not outright strife. As I know all too well, because I've been in this for the last month working on it, and last night, as happens a lot, I woke up at 4 and good luck getting back to sleep. And it's because, this is a big decision. And it's not I told Chuck yesterday, this isn't a slam dunk. There are pros and cons. And everyone has to feel free to vote their conscience and do what they think is best for this congregation in the future. And it's not even fair to say that I have 100% certainty about anything, but we can't get hung up on the transient either. If we stay here, we stay here. If we move, it's another building. But it's still all of you. That's what really matters. And we'll discuss the nuts and bolts later. But we are going to look at this together. We've strived to be open and transparent and give everyone opportunity to go see the building. Everyone will have an opportunity to say what they want to say. They have, they will, and then we will vote. And the decision will be made, and whew, that's one thing I don't have to deal with, unless I'm, of course, then trying to buy a building. But maybe not. We'll see what happens. But we are going to be exercising the power of congregational polity. One of the things that's so important in the Congregationalist movement from which we came is that the congregation makes the decisions. It's a great responsibility, and it's a great honor, and it's a great freedom. And we will be going through that process today. We need to take it seriously because it is humbling to live in a place where we are free to do this. So many people aren't. We are. And I'm glad we could do this together. And regardless of the outcome, and I'm sure the outcome will not be unanimous one way or the other, some people will be disappointed. I suspect. Maybe it will be unanimous, I don't know. Let us keep in mind that the important things in our congregation occur no matter where we meet, no matter what we decide. Buildings are tools to help us with the permanent. The buildings are transient, the purpose is permanent. We allow each person to have free search for truth and meaning, that they can do this in a community, hopefully that is faithful to each other and caring of each other. May we focus on these things. No matter where we meet, no matter how we decide, no matter how small or large our congregation is, no matter the changes in the transient population of our community, may we be faithful to these things. May our church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma, be known for these things, to do the best thing you can in the best way possible for the highest motive. May we be faithful to each other and supportive of each other. May these be the permanent features of both our church and our religion. May it be so.